We'll convene the meeting of the Haverford Township Zoning Hearing Board of Thursday, July 18, 2019. Present at the front table, to my far right, is Ken Richardson, a voting member.
Good evening.
To my right, Bill Rhodes, a voting member.
Good evening.
My immediate left, Bill Malone, our esteemed solicitor. To Bill's left, Ed McGargy, voting member. Next to Ed, we have, I should have gone in the normal order. Jessica Vitale, a voting member. Seated next to Jessica is Kelly Kirk, the Director of Community Planning. Did I get that right this time, Kel?
We can just go with zoning officer. Oh, sure.
Okay, zoning officer. And I'm not sure who's sitting to your left, Kel.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Marge. She has been hired to work in the zoning office as well.
Oh, cool. Hi, Marge.
Hello.
Welcome. All right, and I'm Robert Kane, the chairman of the board and also a voting member. We have two continued cases on our agenda this evening. The first is case Z19-17, David DeCecco and Deborah DeSimone, owners of 37 Columbus Road, Havertown, PA, DC folio number 2209-0037200, who seek a variance to encroach 4 feet into the required 10-foot separation between the proposed deck and the existing garage. The property is on R6 and located in the second ward. And before we call that case formally, Kenny, would you lead us in the pledge?
Yep. Please rise and repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ed, do you want to move the minutes?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We have two sets of minutes. We have the minutes from June 6, 2019 that were distributed. And we also have minutes from June 20th, 2019. And there are a couple errors that need typos. The errors are in the attendance, the present, was also Bill Malone, our solicitor. And under new case Z19-16, we actually concluded that case, and we voted to approve Carol and Michael Holmes, 345 Crescent Hill Drive variances, 5-0. So those need to be fixed. Otherwise, I would move that the minutes be approved as distributed and corrected.
I'll second with the approvals as stated.
I agree. Yes?
I agree.
And so do I. Okay. And now, David and Deborah, want to come forward?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having us here again. Much appreciated.
Okay. At our last meeting, we took testimony from you, and the board had some questions. And I believe you were asked to provide some additional information.
Yes, sir, and I have that with me. I also have made sure that all my exhibits have already been entered, so they're numbered. It's easier the second time around.
Okay.
So if I could present this to you, please.
Yes. You have the numbering sequence. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's okay.
We can share.
If I recall correctly, one of the questions that was asked of us was, what did the existing concrete pad, what was its measurements, and what did it look like? So fortunately, we were able to provide that for you. That is the first picture that we're showing you here. I believe that's Exhibit A5.
Let me just walk you through these real quick, just for clarity of the record. It'll be a
For
little bit
sure.
easier. So you've handed up a set of exhibits, and I have the originals with the exhibit numbers on them. A5, which I'm going to show you just very briefly, what does this show? You can explain in more detail later.
That is A5, sir.
Okay, what is A5?
That is the it was the pre-existing steps and landing area in the back of the property at 37 Columbus.
Okay, and A6, can you tell the board what that is?
That is the same picture shown further out, showing a pond that was also there, but it also gives you a sense of the length of the steps and the deck.
A7,
Bilco doors.
A8,
That is the actual measurements of those pictures that I've just shown you, which is the steps, the landing, and the Bilco doors.
also in the packet, but not marked, right behind that are two additional pictures.
Yes, sir.
What are these? Why are they not? No problem, but why are they not marked?
They're not marked. They were previously submitted.
Confirming
and-
these were in A1 through A4 at the first hearing, correct?
Yes, sir.
You have an exhibit marked as A9. Can you tell the board what that is?
That is the deck, that is the measurement of the deck built over the concrete landing as an overlay, so that the board can get a sense of how we build it over the concrete steps.
Exhibit A10 is another photograph. What does that show?
That is giving a view of both the driveway, the grassy area, as well as the back of the deck.
A11,
That is from the furthest part of the backyard, showing the deck and the skirting with the gate.
A12,
And that is showing the back deck with the stairs and the removable platform.
and finally A13.
That is a drawing of the overall home, the deck, the driveway, the grassy area, basically the entire plot plan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions? Jessica? You ready to ask questions, Jess?
Yeah.
Ed, are you ready to?
No other questions.
Kenny?
Thank you, sir.
Digest a little bit here.
Okay.
So I have a
Bill?
question.
Yes.
So based on page, or, this was one.
They were the previous exhibits, yes.
Yeah, so just to add some clarity, so page A10, I'll go to that one. A10. So A10 shows essentially the bump out of the resulting in the deck from the side of the house.
Sir, could you possibly hold that up? Mine aren't marked, so I apologize. Yes, there you go. Yes, sir.
So I am looking at, one of the questions that we had in the last time, we were talking about the gap, that the existing gap between the back edge and side of the house versus the garage. And the conversation, I think, had been about access to the back, if a fire truck or something needed to get back there.
That's correct.
This proposed deck covers a gap between the house and the edge of the driveway.
That is correct.
And on, whether it's on A9 or whatever, do we have the measurement of the width of that grassy area that's now been bridged by this?
Yes, sir, we do. It's 11 feet, 8 inches.
Okay.
You're going to find that where it says 37 Columbus original layout.
I got it.
It'll show you the
A8,
grass.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, I see it.
11 feet, 8 inches.
Yep. And back on that picture of A10, it looks like some new fencing runs from the deck along the side of the house. Is there a purpose for that?
New fencing. should
Again,
be
on
down.
A10, and I was just looking at this.
They are the air conditioner condensers.
Okay, you just put a enclosure or
And a
sides
trash
for
can
it.
bin, and a trash can bin,
And a
yes.
trash can bin.
Yeah.
So Is it your view that, well, I think I just heard you guys say before that it's a removable deck, and I know that we had talked about whether the space around the doorway, the gate, or the stairs would be somehow movable, maybe as a swing door, you know, a wider door that would allow access?
The removable part is this landing that's at the bottom of the stairs.
Okay.
And that's 7 feet by 3 inches, and the purpose of that is so that when you're walking in your gate, you know how you always wear your lawn out? When you come in,
Yeah.
you know, you're constantly using that. We decided to put that in there so that it's more appealing. But that is not part of the deck. That literally can be, you know, taken up. The gate, of course, can be taken off, but the deck itself is, you know, on footers. That's not going anywhere.
And let me just ask one last question. The positioning of this 10-foot by 13-foot deck, which runs all the way out to the driveway, plus including the stairs,
That's correct.
is that 10 by 13 measurement, does that include the stairs?
It does not.
It does not, okay. So. it's
Including
two-
of the inclusion of the stairs would make it 10 by 16. The landing itself, which goes down the steps, is 3 by 5, no. 3 by 3. And then the landing of the stairs continue down.
Yeah, so I'm looking at A9, where you have removable platform 5 by 7. I
That's
think is-
correct.
is the, okay. Should that be 3 by 7?
3 by 7, yes.
3 by 7.
Okay, and then the 10 by 13 deck, and I understand the positioning you've done because of the, not to block access to the Bilco doors.
That is correct.
Is that, and you're just building over the existing concrete. And so you're really going 5 feet deeper, but you're going, the existing platform, you see how you have two pieces of existing platform on A9?
That is correct.
The one on the left, closest to the stairs, that exists, that's a piece of concrete that exists, that juts out beyond the side of the house.
Yes.
Right, currently. And I know you're going 5 feet deeper into your backyard.
That is correct.
From that edge of that existing platform to the edge of the driveway, is that about 4 feet? Is that,
It's in scale, so it's about 4 feet, yes.
okay. And so the deck as sized in this, the 10 by 13 plus the staircase and the landing at the top, is that, how did you arrive at that size? As opposed to something smaller or just covering the existing platforms?
It kind of falls into material, 10-foot lengths, 16-foot lengths. I mean, really, that's pretty much it.
The other piece of it is that the livability, adding to the aesthetics of the home, adding to the livability of the home, the enjoyment of the home. A 10 by 13 deck with a stairwell that's included is going to allow you a barbecue. It's going to give you a few chairs, but it's not, you know, the 10 by 30 deck that's wrapping around the porch. It's what we felt, adding not only to, it actually helps us with property value in that it becomes a more appealing home to live in.
And for your needs, do you think that's the minimum size you need?
I mean, 10 by 13 isn't a big deck at all.
Just trying to figure out whether this is your perceived minimum size for your needs.
I believe so, yes, sir.
I don't have no other questions.
Jess?
I don't have any questions.
Ed?
No questions.
Kenny?
None?
there anything else you guys would like to add?
Other than I appreciate your time and your kindness and all of those things. It's a little nerve-wracking as a person, so. It's all you. There was a much younger guy here last time. I wasn't afraid of him.
They like yeah. Okay.
Well, just one final word. I do want the board to know that the intention was to make, this was a distressed property. It was really very difficult on the neighbors. As you can see in some of the pictures, everything was run down. The pond was there. There was trash everywhere. And we worked really, really hard to make sure that this would be a neighborhood and that someone, not just us, would find this appealing. Aesthetics.
All right. With that, I'll ask if there's anyone present that received certified mail that wishes to testify. Anyone present that received regular mail? Any other residents of Haverford Township? With that, we'll close the record on this case, and the decision will be rendered either this evening or, if not this evening, at our next regularly scheduled meeting on August 15th. That's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right, our next continued case is case Z19-18, School District of Haverford Township, owners of the property located at 200 Mill Road, Havertown, PA, who seek variances from the provisions of section 182-602C3, building coverage, 182-602C4, front yard setback, 182-602C7, building height, and 182-602C8, impervious coverage, to allow construction of an addition to the high school for additional classrooms and updates to music, arts, and physical education. Property is owned by INS and located in the 7th Ward. And we have Joe Clement Esquire here on behalf of the school district.
Thank you. The last time we were here, we had 7 exhibits that we had entered into the record. I just handed out a packet of new exhibits to be in addition to those 7 to be entered into the record, beginning with A8, which is programming details prepared by KCBA Architects consisting of 4 sheets. A9 is a traffic engineer's letter consisting of 2 sheets. A10 is a revised building and parking lot expansion plan, 1 sheet. A11 is a revised building and parking lot expansion plan depicting staging areas, 1 sheet. A12 is a curriculum vitae of Doug Waite. We have him pinch hitting this evening as our engineer. The gentleman that was here last time around, Mr. Shank, is expecting a baby, so he couldn't be here this evening. And A13 is a curriculum vitae of Guy DiMartino, the district traffic engineer. So last time we were here, we had gone through a number of issues, and at the end of the day, there were some questions that primarily related to programming, how we arrived at the number of classrooms, information about the students that were matriculating through the school district at this time, and projections on the number of students, as well as you asked us to take a look at the parking area and reconfiguring that potentially as one-way parking or getting it a little further away from, it was the baseball field that was only 220 some odd feet away, as well as some questions about just general traffic concerns and analyses, and then staging areas and lay down space for construction. So with that being said, I'd like to call Ryan Orr, who was already qualified as an expert previously, and ask him to just go through the programming details prepared at A8.
And Ryan, you were sworn at the last hearing.
Yes, sir.
And you're still under.
So moving into A8, this is a slide from a presentation that was given publicly at a school board meeting and represents the enrollment study that was conducted by a third party for the school district of Haverford Township. And these numbers were utilized in order to develop how many students were coming through the school district and would eventually end up in the high school. And as previously discussed in the last portion of the hearing, these students are already in the school district. So they're coming up through the schools, through the elementary schools, middle schools, and will be arriving in the high school. And these numbers represent those students coming through the high school.
And Ryan, can you tell us what the high number mark is from 2017?
Yes, it is 1,772 students.
That's in 2017, and what's the most number of students they'll be coming through, and in what year?
Yes, in 2026, 2,210 students, which is a difference of 438 students. Moving on to the next page of A8.
Can I
Yes.
just ask one quick question? So in your year column, is that the school year ending, or is that school year beginning?
So I think the question is, for the 2017 numbers, is that the 2017 school year?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's
Yes.
and you measuring that by when you finish, like that's 2017 is like the numbers for the school year ending June of 2017.
I believe so, yes. Moving on to the second page, this is, again, a slide from that same presentation presented at the public school board meeting. And this is our chart taking those enrollment numbers and comparing them to the existing classroom utilization at the high school. So part of this exercise is the district requested us to look at how many students could fit within the existing classroom structure, scheduling, and we broke that down by various subjects, so English, social studies, math, world language, science, business as the core classes. So you can see the column designated desired room capacity. We're targeting 25 students as a targeted average. And then we took the actual enrollment numbers of all of those classes, those scheduled classes, and that is under the current enrollment, multiplied them by the number of sections, and then subtracted the desired capacity versus the current enrollment to arrive at the number of seats that were still available within the current classroom and scheduling structure.
And Ryan, just to be clear, the current enrollment is for the 2017 school year?
Yes.
And within the existing facilities, there's a number that says 124 seats available on this sheet. So that means what?
That means that within the current classroom structure, high school building, there are 124 seats within classrooms that are not filled.
And if we look back at the first page, in 2018, there was an increase of how many students?
83 students cumulatively.
So this 124 seats, 83 are now taken up.
Correct.
So if the row for 2019 is the school year just ended, then the current high water mark is 1855.
Yes, but yes, currently,
So on the
yes.
next page where you just said the current enrollment was 2019?
No, the current enrollment was 2017.
Oh, 2017,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Right.
All right.
And then based on the total students coming within the district, the district, not coming into the district, coming to the high school through the district designated that we designed for 400 additional students, which you can see is actually less than the total 438 on the previous page as the high water. So we took that number of seats that we were planning for and translated that minus the 200 or 124 and got 276 seats remaining. So that means that we would need to build 11 classrooms at the 25 seat per average. So that is the core classrooms. If we move to the next page, we'll see that those numbers do not incorporate other specialties of the high school. One of those specialties is music. This is one that we found that the current enrollment would increase. And so we took the percentage of current music students enrolled in chorus, orchestra, and band compared to the 400 students that were entering the high school, enlarged those numbers, and then multiplied that by square footage in order to determine how large the new band, orchestra, and chorus rooms would need to be. Moving on to the next page, we also found that physical education would need more space. Even though there is a large two-station gym, it's at full capacity. But now there are alternate physical education ways of teaching. One of those that the district maintains is Lifetime Fitness, but those classes are limited based on the space that they are conducted in, which is the current weight room. So the weight room, fitness room would be expanded in order to accommodate these extra physical education classes without building another gym, let's say. Yep.
So if the board has any questions for Mr. Orr with respect to the programming, we'd be happy to answer those now before we get into the traffic aspect of things.
Kenny, do you have?
Yeah, we'll start at the end with the Lifetime Fitness. And on all your other classes and courses and all that, you gave us numbers. On Lifetime Fitness, you gave us words. Spatial limitations means nothing to me.
Utilizing, part of this is when it's nice outside, those gym classes are actually conducted outside. So some of that space is not utilized when those classes are outside. So part of that study was conducted based on scheduling, based on the current need for that space to be enlarged in order to accommodate those future sections that are coming in. We know that every single student is going to take physical education, gym. Where some of these other pieces, not every single student is going to take chorus, orchestra, band, and then similarly, each student is going to take a core class. So that's in order to not build a new gymnasium, this alternate way of physical education teaching is improvised.
So your resolution is the one-story building?
Part of it's actually, the addition piece is actually entirely music. We are currently, the plan is to renovate the current weight room and expand it into what is presently the band room. So if you look back at Exhibit A3, apologize, page option 2.
Wasn't looking.
You can see to the left side of the plan where Lifetime Fitness is. Roughly, the square on the right-hand side is where the current weight room is, and it is expanding to the same width as the proposed band room. So that entire space will be enlarged in order to accommodate Lifetime Fitness. On the page prior, you can see room 105, fitness room is the current fitness room. And I apologize, I said band, it's actually orchestra. It is incorporating the current orchestra room into Lifetime Fitness.
So
It's like the chicken or the egg. You're expanding the band room because the Lifetime Fitness is getting bigger,
No, it's
or you're expanding the band room because, and then Lifetime Fitness is going to grow.
well, we know that both are going to grow. So we have to accommodate
Now, you gave
both.
me band numbers. You didn't give me any Lifetime numbers.
well, I think Mr. Orr, maybe you could
umbrella.
help, right, maybe you could help explain that this fitness room is in fact going to take the place of potentially needing to expand the gymnasium further, is that correct?
Correct.
So there's programming that can go on in this fitness area, this Lifetime Fitness area, that would otherwise have to take place in the gymnasium requiring more square footage. Correct?
Correct.
I don't have a number.
400 students divided by 25 per
How
classroom.
many use the current Lifetime Fitness?
I don't have those numbers currently.
I mean, then we can extract what 400 additional students would require.
As far as the size, do you know, Mr. Orr, do you know what the size of that room is, roughly?
It'd be approximately 2,000 square feet.
But I think the question that Mr. Richardson keeps asking is, who uses Lifetime Fitness? How many people use Lifetime Fitness? So that there can be a determination in the future with the expansion as to how many
Understood.
will use Lifetime Fitness.
Understood.
Should we correct that?
Yeah.
And I think that, we will call another witness that could probably better answer that question than our architect. Before I butcher your name.
Lynn Blau.
Ms. Blausch will come up and be able to tell us about that. Ms. Blausch is a representative, the president of CB Development and Services, Inc., and they have been an owner's rep for 20 years for the district and can go through that programming. So before we get to Lynn, probably should finish with Mr. Orr, and then we'll answer that question if that's at the appropriate time, if that's all right.
Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, but I'll share.
But for Ryan, Jessica?
This may be a question for Lynn, but so I have a couple questions. Based on the academic program analysis, you list that you need 11 classrooms at 25 seats per classroom.
Correct.
But it looks like your plan is showing 14 classrooms.
So part of that, I'll refer back to Exhibit A3, Option 2. We need to connect the addition back to the existing school, and in the optimal place to build the addition so as to least disturb the neighbors. That was determined to be where Option 2 is showing that addition wing. Where it says SGI on that Option 2 in blue, if you flip back one page, you'll see that it says 137 WL, so that is a full-size world language classroom. So we essentially need to cut a corridor through that classroom, and we're doing that on all 3 floors. So that takes away 3 classrooms, so we need to build 3 classrooms back. That's where we get to the 14 classrooms.
So, Mr. Orr, there's 14 new classrooms being built, correct?
Correct,
We're losing 3 classrooms,
correct,
so the total net is,
11.
thank you.
And what
Let
is
me clarify.
happening?
Go ahead.
What is happening in that SGI space?
That SGI space would be additional education space. We actually see education trends moving towards needing more of these small group instruction rooms for other programs that the district needs.
And were those, the capacity of those rooms, let's say, taken into account in the total?
So they are typically,
Class.
we'll say, pull-out spaces. So a class is going on, I'm going to take a student briefly from that class, not the entire class, so that student is still counted in the full-size classrooms. So they would not be included in the total capacity.
Is there a way to get just some example of what those rooms are used for?
Special education, reading specialists, math specialists, tutoring programs, any of these spaces that may require one-on-one, small or smaller groups, 3 to 4 students, 5 to 8 students.
And are there any spaces that exist already in the school that accommodate that purpose?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So there aren't any special education rooms or reading
No,
resource
not,
rooms?
I'm not stating special education rooms, small group rooms.
But one of the uses you said for the small group room was special education.
Yes, correct.
But then there are additional special education classrooms.
Yes.
And I'll ask you this question in case you know. It's not clear. So the design directive is for 400 additional students. Is that 400 to the 2017 number?
Yes.
So you're designing to 2,127?
Yes.
I'm sorry, 2,172.
72, right.
Okay, and then on the academic program, do you have your desired room capacity? On the core academic program chart, there's a desired room capacity of 25, and then a maximum room capacity of 30.
So this is, 25 is an average, so some classrooms are going to have 22, some are going to have 28. So as an average, we are trying to fill that capacity average out to 25.
Okay. Does the township have any policy right now towards maximum class sizes that they're trying to achieve?
Township or district?
The district, sorry.
I think that's more,
Okay,
Correct,
I can hold that
yes.
question. Yeah. All right, no further questions.
Ed?
Yeah, the question that was asked at the last meeting, and we didn't really get the answer to that, is the 2018 fall enrollment the highest population the high school has ever had?
that's a great question that I think Lynn can probably speak to a little bit more, but what we do know is that the school was designed to a certain number. Whether it ever got to that capacity, we're not sure, but could you speak to that?
Yeah, so the current designed school is at maximum capacity, so every space is full. I can't fit another person in there, is 1927 as currently designed.
And to our knowledge, we don't know if it ever reached that capacity, we just know that that's what's available.
Right. Which, yeah, right.
Is that at 25 students per room?
Yes. On average, correct. On average, 25 per.
Okay, and I know there's been some revisions in this packet that you sent, so are we only talking about the population at this point, or is there other questions for the architect?
I had only one other question about these pages on A8.
Yes.
And it was just a question, on the third page for the support programs, the basis for which we measure 22.5 square feet per student in a chorus versus 30 for someone in the orchestra, presumably they have an instrument, they need more space.
Correct. Correct.
Where did those numbers come from? Are they just sort of, standard for music? Is this the school district's own experience?
So it's the design guidelines that our firm as educational design professionals utilize in order to calculate these spaces. And so therefore the district in hiring us is therefore adopting these square footages as a principle.
I got more.
I assume the answer to my question is we're only asking about population. I didn't get an answer.
I can take other questions if you'd like.
The architect questions I had were, we have various variances that are being requested, and I don't remember hearing at the last hearing, building coverage, whether the school district is currently over the building coverage at this point, or is it meeting the current required building coverage?
That may be a civil.
Yeah, that's more of a civil engineer question.
Okay. And what the other question I had was about increasing by 400 students. Do you have, whether that would be a civil engineering too, is about the sewage capacity? The infrastructure for the neighborhood?
That's
Yes.
not an art, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It rolls downhill.
Kenny? You said you have another question.
Yeah, in regards to what Bill asked, is there a state, you have your company guideline, is there a state minimum?
So there's not a state minimum mandated by the state of Pennsylvania.
For
They-
a class size, for a class physical size?
So, not for a full-size band room. They have guidelines for music rooms. They actually defer their standards. So, in educational standards and construction standards, current standards are dictated by the local board of directors with regards, keeping in regards federal, state, local laws and the district's educational guidelines. So that's where this falls under the educational guidelines. Standards would be by the district.
So the state has the guideline for a music room?
For a small music room, yes.
That's where they designate a small,
These are not small music rooms. A small music room would be
now the state guideline says small music room?
it says music classroom.
Okay, and what's that,
A general music classroom
what size?
for, they give you a minimum of 660 square feet. I'm unable to hold a full-size band in a 660 square foot space.
How about a chorus?
No.
No. So what would,
The minimum of 660 is 25 for a music room. 25 students.
okay, now we're getting somewhere. Okay, the other thing is, if you take the maximum capacity of 30, and I'm not sure who designated that, but that's who designated that?
The district said we were not going to have more than 30 students in a classroom.
So if you take that 30, okay, and you extrapolate it about the 400 seats planned and everything, you would have 74 extra seats
Well,
without doing anything.
Well, again, high school scheduling is a little bit different where students are going to take elective courses even within core classes, there are going to be choices that the students can take. So whether it's English literature, American literature, maybe not all the students are going into English literature, so there'll be a few seats in those classes. So there's still, even if you fill it to capacity, you're not going to be able to reach that total capacity.
So, Mr. Orr, perhaps put it a little bit differently.
Yes,
You have to design towards averages of class size.
correct,
And the average class size is going to be perhaps what?
25,
And then that will accommodate a maximum class size, though, of up to,
30,
so there may be less than 30 students in the classroom, but there can be up to that number.
correct.
And we can't just design to a 30 number maximum because we'd be at capacity in every classroom and over capacity, correct?
Correct.
Except it's an arbitrary number that somebody picked out. That's,
But it's a district guideline that they are mandating as a guideline.
And Mr. Orr, in your professional opinion, though, that's not just an arbitrary number, that's a guideline that you have come up with, your firm has come up with, and it's something that's throughout the state.
Yeah, we see school districts oftentimes, not oftentimes, school districts use 30 as their maximum class size.
that's throughout the state,
Yes.
Like
Again, it's,
like Philadelphia.
I can't speak to Philadelphia.
In your experience, sir.
In our experience.
The other thing is that one of the standards that you need to meet in getting a variance is the minimum amount needed, not wanted, needed,
Understood.
okay? So that's what I need to hear.
And Mr. Orr, in your professional opinion, is this the minimum space that's needed to accommodate the students that are coming through the district at this time?
Yes,
And these students are coming through the district no matter what.
correct,
So we need to accommodate 400 students at a minimum, no matter what.
correct.
And it's also your opinion that currently at maximum, we can meet that.
I'm not sure I understand
That maximum capacity, you can add 474 more students currently.
not as currently built.
Yes,
No.
do the math.
Well, once again, we can't fill every classroom to that 30 person
Okay, I understand
max.
that, but by the numbers, if you look at 400 students at maximum, current maximum capacity, you can fit 474 more students. Whether you want to or not, or whether you want to put them in smaller groups is another story.
Part of PDE, Pennsylvania Department of Education guidelines, once again, their factor is in secondary education, 80 to 85% is their standard for calculating maximum capacity. So the state guideline is total capacity 85%, which 30 to 25 is roughly that 80 to 85% reduction. So the state is saying, you are to design to 80 to 85% total capacity, and that is your mandate to design the entire school around. So with our addition, we're falling within that 80 to 85% capacity for the entire school with our additions.
So, Mr. Ward, just because a classroom can accommodate 30 students doesn't mean that it should accommodate 30 students.
Correct.
And to your design standards that you just described, you are designing this and the facilities associated with it to be 25 students per classroom.
Correct.
That's all I have.
Any other questions, Brian? Bill? Jessica?
No.
Ed? No. Brian, I have just a few.
Yes.
If this, let's assume for a moment that the application's approved, are you the appropriate person for construction-related questions to be posed to?
I believe that Lynn Blausch would be the one to address those.
I'll ask.
Okay.
Why don't we take a break? Or take a 2-minute recess? Does he know? We're off the record. Does he know to shut it down, come? All right. I wanted to follow up on that. We had 2 trees fall, like 2. Back on the record? Okay. Who do you want to call next, Joe?
I'd like to call Lynn to just summarize some things that Mr. Orr said and to add a little bit to it. So,
Did we swear you?
not yet.
No.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I
Your
do.
full name and the capacity in which you appear for the board, please.
My full name is Lynn Blausch. I can spell that for you. Blahusch. And our firm is, I work for CB Development Services, Inc. We've been the district's owner's reps for the last 20 years as it relates to their capital projects and things like that.
Lynn, could you just tell them what your role is for the company?
Yeah, I was a founding partner. We've been in business for now 25 years. I'm currently the president.
Okay.
And Lynn, could you tell us tell the board, very briefly, how we arrived at the number of classrooms, the square footage, and how that all came about?
Yeah, back in February of 2018, the district hired KCBA to do a facility study of all their facilities to see, in anticipation of spending the money on Linwood, what other monies might need to be spent, understanding the limit on money they have. And when we did that, there were issues with all the schools, as there always is, but what came out in addition was done was the enrollment studies, and it became very clear that there was a huge, this 400 kids coming looming down, and that we needed to do something at the high school. So knowing they had Linwood, knowing that they have some other issues at the elementary schools, we were charged to come up with the minimum amount of addition that could be done at the high school to accommodate these kids. And I think that Ryan went through and gave you the summary pages of some of the work his firm did on programming. But the programming effort was probably at least 2 months, and it involved numerous meetings with Pete, the principal here, and his staff, because it's unlike an elementary school. You can't just take the 400 kids and say, okay, we're going to split them into the classrooms because they don't move. The hard part with understanding it, and it was an exhaustive study, is because of the scheduling. You know, these kids move around, and the block scheduling and all the different classes that they can take. So I think what we may have faulted in just showing you the summary level, but there was a lot of effort that went into that, and there was a whole report on the programming. So the district, I know that it seems as though it sounds like we're trying to build more than we need. Trust me, we were pushing these guys, KCBA as our design firm, to come up with a bare minimum because we wanted to minimize the cost, because they only have limited funds. With respect to the fitness room, it's used, that room is a small room next to the gymnasiums, and we didn't want to spend the money for a new gym for 2 reasons. One, there's no room to build it, and we thought, how can we accommodate the need for physical education without doing that? And the thought was to expand this room. If you ever go to the high school, from a practical standpoint, the kids use it, all the teams use that, it's a weight room, basically. And they all use it for weights after school. And they're working in the hallways. It actually borders on unsafe. So when we were expanding for the choral and the music, it just squared off that building, and it made sense to just expand that to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So I just wanted to just clarify that we are absolutely, as a team, been charged to come up with the minimum required to deal with these 400 kids.
Thank you. I'd like to call my next witness, unless there's questions for Lynn.
Yeah, let's see if there's questions. Bill?
No.
Jessica?
I would just like to ask to see the enrollment study, if that's possible.
Sure.
That could be submitted.
The other question I had was the population has decreased in Haverford Township since the 70s. And do you have any idea where the extra students are coming from?
No, the district engaged a separate consultant to do the enrollment study, and he presented that at the school board. It is a whole report. You're seeing 1 page of it, so we can certainly get that for you.
And would that question be answered in that report?
I think it would, and it's not, unlike, the elementary schools, we found that was pretty flat line, which would lend itself to what you're saying, that you wouldn't expect that. Unfortunately, these kids, this 400, they're in the school district now, so it isn't a hypothetical. They're within the district.
Yeah, I just wondered if the Catholic schools were closing.
Yeah, I couldn't venture to guess
Could be.
why. Yeah.
Could be. It could be gentrification, it could be Catholic schools closing, but we'll get you that report and let you take a look.
Thank you. Ed? Do you have any other questions, Ed?
No, I do not.
Kenny? Anything else? All right, I have no questions.
Thank you.
Do you have an extra?
I'd like to call Guy DiMartino as our traffic engineer from TPD. And Guy has not been sworn in or qualified as an expert yet.
Okay, please raise your right hand, Guy. Swear to tell the truth, all the truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And your full name and capacity in which you appear before the board this evening, for the record, please.
Yes, full name is Guido, or you can call me Guy DiMartino. I am a senior project manager with Traffic Planning and Design, Inc. And I'm before you tonight as a registered professional engineer, focusing on traffic engineering.
And Mr. DiMartino, if you turn to Exhibit 13, is that your CV?
It is.
Give the board a moment to review that.
Guy, what did you do for Springfield High School?
As I'm sure you're aware, they're on the process of building a new high school, so I did all the traffic engineering work related to that, traffic study. Our firm was responsible for do some of the design aspects as well.
Mr. DiMartino, you've been a licensed professional engineer in both the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the Commonwealth of Virginia. Pennsylvania since 2006, is that correct?
It is correct.
Has your licensure in either of the Commonwealths been suspended, revoked, or anything of that nature at any time since, say, 2006?
No.
Is both of your licensures up to date in both states or just Pennsylvania at this point?
They are both current.
I have no questions. It does appear to me that Mr. DiMartino does have the requisite educational and professional experience to be admitted as an expert in the field of traffic engineering.
Okay, unless there's any objection or discussion from any board members, we'll accept Guy as an expert in that area. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. Guy, could you just briefly describe what's marked as Exhibit A9?
Certainly. Conducted a traffic evaluation for the proposed expansion of the high school. I know you heard a lot of numbers this evening. We focused primarily on the trip generation associated with the traffic increase, associated with the student enrollment increase that's expected. As you heard from the school year that just ended, the enrollment was 1,855 students. It's anticipated that the high number mark for the student capacity will be 2,210 students, or an increase of 355 students when compared to the school year that just completed this past June. Also, you heard Ryan mention that if the current school building as it sits today could really accommodate, it was close to 2,000 students. I think it was 1,972 students. So if you factor that in with the enrollment that from the school year that was just factored in, we're talking about an increase of 355 students when you compare the maximum capacity to the capacity to the enrollment that just for this previous school year. So there's actually some additional students that could be absorbed within the existing school today. So, but this study that I'm going to be outlined is focusing on the increase of 355 students.
Cutting right to the chase, Mr. DiMartino, bottom line is how many additional trips would be generated by these students?
By the additional 355 students in the morning peak hour for the school, a 1 hour period, there would be 107 additional trips anticipated. And then during the afternoon's school peak hour, 1 hour period, there would be 67 additional trips.
And Mr. DiMartino, in your professional opinion, is that any meaningful increase in the number of trips versus what's there today?
No, I believe it would be a discernible impact or discernible amount of traffic experienced over time.
Did you say no discernible
No,
impact?
yeah, no discernible impact. Correct.
No further questions.
So, Guy, did you observe any trips at all, or were you not able to do that because school's not in session?
Correct. We were engaged over the summer when school was not in session.
Bill?
Okay, so the school currently has a maximum capacity of 1972, but we are designing for space for up to 400 additional students. Is that both right?
Yes.
Okay. So in theory, the maximum capacity, putting aside the classroom, maximum classroom or goals that we've got, is 2372.
No. If we go back to the first exhibit that we had presented here this evening, you're really seeing that we're absorbing 124 of those students within the existing capacity.
Okay.
So we're only designing for about 276 additional seats.
Okay. So in the methodology that you're using, you said you're looking at current students and you're looking at projected students, but you are really focusing on maximum student capacity, right? So we're trying not to focus on maximum student capacity in some of the other earlier discussions. For traffic, what is maximum student capacity? Why is that the driver as opposed to actual students that we have now and the traffic burden that they bear on the neighborhood versus the projected additional 400 students and the burden that they produce rather than maximum?
So maybe I can go through a line of questioning, it would help that a little bit. So right now, Guy, when you looked at the existing traffic counts, you used a student population of what?
1,855 students.
And that is the current enrollment of students today, correct?
Yes.
And when looking at the, call it, maximum enrollment of 2,210 students, where did you come up with that number?
That number is consistent with the numbers that Ryan had testified to before this evening from the projections for the year of 2026, school year ending 2026.
So you took the 2210 and subtracted the 1855.
Correct.
And so that's why, that's the number that you're really focusing on, and then extrapolating from your trip manual, which is a industry standard nationally.
Yes, it's an industry standard.
Yeah. And, okay, so, and then you've just testified that you've done no actual calculation. So we don't know, or do you know, to what extent the experience at Haverford Township School District High School may be similar or different than a typical high school on which the manual was based?
I'm a resident. I'm familiar with the area. The industry standard data is just that. It's industry standard data, but it's based on a compilation of studies nationwide.
Right.
I believe probably pushing over 50 studies or so of high schools. So I have no reason to believe that it's not comparable. That data is not comparable to what is being proposed here at this high school.
Okay. So in your trip generation table, and in the narrative afterwards, you compared the planned increase in students enrollment with existing maximum student capacity rather than existing student capacity, which means the delta between the two numbers is smaller than the delta between the projected number and the current number. The projected number is what it is. The current number is 1855, I think.
Right.
But the existing maximum capacity is 1972. The difference between 1972 and 1855 is roughly 115 students. So when you compare the delta to figure out the traffic impact, you actually compare it against a smaller number than the difference between 1855 and the new number, the projected number.
I compared 2,210 to 1855. If I compared 2,000...
Okay, I was just saying the narrative at the beginning of, right after the table says you compared it to the existing maximum student capacity. Or did you compare it to the existing current enrollment?
Could you, perhaps you could point out?
The narrative following Table 2 says, as shown in Table 2, the planned increase in student enrollment compared to the existing maximum student
I
capacity.
can explain that. If you look at what is in your binder, that is the correct version of the traffic report or the traffic analysis. There was a letter that was provided earlier that had some typographical errors in it. So I think you may be reading from an earlier version than what was provided. Now,
What
I
is
may
the
be-
date
Oh,
of
you're
that
right.
letter you're referencing?
So you guys have changed it in the notebook here, okay?
Yes.
Compared to what you submitted before.
Correct. We recognize that there were some typos in that letter and
Right.
corrected it.
And so that goes to the next one, where the report submitted to us for this meeting suggested that more people leave the school in the morning than arrive in the school. That's been fixed too? Because I would imagine that more people arrive at the school in the morning than leave.
During
Yes.
peak hours,
Yeah,
correct.
during peak hours, yeah,
Exhibit A9 is dated July 18th, 2019.
okay. And then, so what you've shown is that the difference is instead of 76 new vehicle trips in the morning, 31 entering and 45 leaving, you're showing 107 as being submitted here, 73 entering and 34 exiting. And that includes students and faculty, the additional 20 faculty?
That's correct.
Okay. And then, since you still don't expect any increase in busing, right?
That's correct.
And how many students do we think that the excess busing capacity currently will be absorbing in the future? Do we know?
I cannot speak
You've
to that number.
assumed that every new student will not be on a bus.
That is not accurate.
Okay.
I did speak with, excuse me, I don't know his exact title, but the head of transportation.
Okay.
And I was told there is capacity within the current bus allotment to serve these additional 400 students.
If they all took the bus. But because you're a traffic report, you've obviously assumed that a lot of them don't.
Right.
Right, okay.
And I was also told that it's roughly a 50-50 split. I think it's slightly skewed towards, I think it's roughly about 45% of the students who are bused or fall within that range to be bused. Whether or not they're actually bused, I can't speak to that. But roughly 45% of the enrollment is bused.
Of the full high school enrollment
Correct.
is eligible to take the bus.
Correct, with the balance,
And then
55%.
some smaller number obviously doesn't. They either walk or anyway, or they drop off, or they drive.
Yes.
Okay, and then I only had one other question. The last sentence, which I'm assuming didn't change, because it's your conclusion, that you say it's in your opinion that the proposed high school expansion will result in no discernible difference in traffic operations to the motoring public. So the last two words there, the motoring public, we're talking about traffic on the road, but what about parking and the streets and the immediate neighbors around the high school? Did you analyze the impacts on them from the additional traffic?
I did not, school's not operating when we were engaged in this.
Okay.
But keep in mind that these numbers, we're talking the July 18th letter is focusing on the increase of 355 students. It's anticipated to be over a 7-year period, so it's about 50 students on average per year over that 7-year period.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the rate of change is as important as the magnitude of the change over time for the neighbors. We heard testimony at the last meeting about neighbors who've said, my biggest concern is traffic and parking. But I just want to make sure on the record, you haven't been engaged to study the impacts on street parking or traffic flow in the neighborhood and the impacts on the neighbors. Only the impacts on the motoring public, which I assume means other cars who are driving around the road.
Guy, I think really the question is, when you did this analysis, you focused in on the number of peak hour trips, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And whether or not those peak hour trips would have any impact on the traffic flow during those peak hours.
That's correct.
But you did not look at necessarily parking within the neighborhoods.
Correct.
But all moving traffic would have been considered.
And you analyze, is there anything about the school district's location and Mill Road and the surrounding streets around that might give you some pause as to whether the congestion around the high school might mean that the manual that you use might not be particularly applicable, or are you comfortable that the particular circumstances of this layout of the school and its neighborhood is a good fit for the manual?
I believe it's a good fit. I mean, the way, we all know, the way the high school is situated, Haverford Town's a neighborhood setting. A lot of people walk. You have access to the high school from a number of directions, whether if you're cutting through the middle school or cutting through the track or any other of the neighborhood roads if you're a walker or a bicyclist. So I believe the manual is an accurate representation.
Is an accurate.
Is an accurate.
An accurate.
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any questions for him. Ed?
Now, I'm looking at the table two trip generation. Can you explain, you have, in the morning, have 73 new students entering and only 34 exiting? but there's no student parking on the site, so I'm trying to figure out what that means.
The trip generation, the trip generation is based on the independent variable to determine the number of trips is students. But the trip generation that we're speaking to, the 73 trips, that's made up of not only students, staff, faculty, deliveries. It could be made up of buses, but in this case, we're not adding buses, but it encompasses all vehicles. So the entering vehicles could accommodate, in this case, would be students who are, or parents driving, dropping off, and then leaving, and then also staff in this case, or faculty arriving.
Yeah, but you have less, so I'm trying to figure out where these people are staying, if they're just
So-
parents.
Right,
Staying.
right, because they're entering,
Students are not staying, their buses are not staying,
well, faculty are staying.
that's 20. 20 new faculty, I don't know how many other.
Right, and this is a 1 hour period. It's possible that somebody could be there for an appointment, and those numbers are included in here as well, where they might be there for an hour and a half. And so that's, it's shown as an entering vehicle, but not as an exiting vehicle, because they exceed that 1 hour window, this 1 hour peak period that we're evaluating.
You also don't figure in Grand Friends Day, where they have all the parents come in at the same time, too, and for the events that they have, and parent-teacher conferences and stuff, where all of them come in. That's the elementary schools I know. I don't know what the high school might have at the same thing. So it is a bulk of people that could possibly come in and impact these numbers. So you base your busing numbers on their information they provided to you, the new buses. I'm suggesting if the buses aren't full now, we wouldn't be paying for 7 extra buses that we don't need for the students. So we wouldn't be paying for extra buses we didn't need. It seems to me that, I don't know how you would factor it in, but a lot of the kids aren't riding the bus maybe because the bus gets there too early and they want to wait till last minute and have their parents drop them off. So I would think more and more kids are going to be dropped off and the traffic is increased. And I don't know if they're not using the bus, somebody's dropping them off because they're not all living close within the walking distance. Do you factor that into your numbers, or you just base it on?
It's all based on the numbers. Like I mentioned, the industry standard data, the IT trip generation manual data, that's the basis for the numbers presented in Table 2. They're based on actual studies at existing high schools where counts are performed. They collect the number of trips that they observe. They collect information from those given schools with number of students, and based on that, they develop a rate. And we then utilize that rate to determine how many trips would be generated for a site like this.
But 400 new students coming in, and your manuals that you're using wouldn't forecast bus trips. Do you have bus trip numbers?
But bus trips are included in these trip numbers. These total trip numbers that are presented in Table 2 include
basing your
buses,
numbers.
students.
Am I correct that you're basing your numbers on what the school district provided you and say, we're not going to have any more buses even though we're having 400 new kids?
I determined the trip generation increase relative to the student increase. Whether those trips are buses or no buses, the trip increase is anticipated to be what is presented in Table 2. What I'm saying is the numbers presented in Table 2 with the increase, there's no
Your
buses
manuals that you're
included
using,
in this.
Your manuals would use, if you have 400 students coming in, your manuals would suggest that would not have any more buses. That's what you normally would rely on, just the school district telling you that, as opposed to any type of study overall. When you add 400 students, how many buses would that increase? But your manuals don't tell you that, it just tells you to use the school numbers.
The manual tells you how many trips would be generated, and then it's up to the school district to tell you how those trips would be broken out, whether or not they would be cars or buses. In this case, the answer is there will be no additional buses, so I'm working on the assumption, for example, in the morning peak hour, those 107 trips will all be cars and 0 buses.
Mr. DiMartino, put another way, you didn't carve out trips that the manual suggested may be generated because there are no buses.
Correct. And to take it one step further, if the school district told me they were going to add 10 buses, which they are not doing, they're adding 0 buses, the 107 additional trips in the morning would still be 107. That would just be split between 97 cars and 10 buses.
So your numbers would suggest that parents are carpooling with their students? Because there are 400 kids coming, so I don't know how many And you only have 107 increase, you said?
Right, and then there's certain people that bus, there's walkers, so all that is factored into these numbers.
If they're not riding the bus now, they're not going to be riding the bus in the future. The buses aren't full now, how will they be full in the future? So your 400 kids are going to be 400 more cars bringing those kids, or slightly less than 400, not 107, I would think.
Or let me just follow up on that point. I think you'd said something like 45% of the current population, school-age population, is entitled to a bus ride.
Correct.
So of the 400, let's just say roughly 200 are eligible for buses. And of that, we know that, let's say half of them actually take the bus, right? Because we know that not everyone who's eligible to take the bus takes them because they're not full. Otherwise, the school district would have fewer buses. So we're talking, let's say maybe there's 300 kids out of the 400 who are not on the buses. Now, some of them are walking, clearly, right? Because they're not eligible for a bus. They live close enough. But let's just say there's still 100. Now I think your analysis shows that you've got 73 entering and 34 exiting, which is a net 39 people staying. And 20 of them are faculty. So you've got 19 people out of over 100 who are not walking and not taking the bus that are staying, or they're just parking in the streets. Is that fair? The 39,
I follow you on the
Yep.
39.
Yeah, the 39 net,
Correct,
20 of them are
correct.
faculty.
Correct, so it's 19.
So 19 kids out of the 100 who are not walking or taking a bus. So they're driving or carpooling or parking, but they're parking somewhere. And I don't believe they're parking on campus, but maybe they are. So I'm not sure who those 19 are, but let's just say they're students. That still leaves about 80 kids or 80 rides or 80 trips individual. They may be very efficient carpoolers, but if they're not, there's going to be additional traffic that's somehow coming to school and staying with cars.
That's based on all the assumptions that you made.
I did.
Where
but I
I'm
tried
basing
to
this
base
on
those
industry
assumptions
standard
fairly
data.
on the numbers and the way you were analyzing this.
Well, I think, Mr. DiMartino, so for a peak hour trip in the morning, what time frame is that?
It's a 1 hour period. The morning bell at the high school, I believe 7:30 a.m. Normally students might arrive 10, 15 minutes. I would venture to guess it's roughly 7 to 8 a.m.
So, Mr. DiMartino, if a student were to arrive, if a student were to be dropped off at, like, I don't know, 8:25, and the parent were to leave at 8:32, would that trip be captured?
No.
So it could be that a number of these trips are people that are either early arriving and then leaving, or arriving late and leaving after the time
So
period
your
of 1
peak
hour.
hour is exactly 1 hour before the bell rings,
No, it's a 1 hour period.
in the middle of which the bell rings? Or
I
during,
use
or
that
during which?
I use that as an example. That's just, again, school wasn't operating when we performed this study, so we didn't do counts, but traditionally, it normally straddles. The peak hour typically normally straddles the bell times roughly,
Yeah,
give or
okay.
take.
So the bell time is in the middle of this window of time, or the bell ringing.
Could be.
So the idea that, the statement you made, I don't know that that's accurate.
I don't know, I never made it to high school on time.
And I'm sorry, I just wanted to
No,
try to
just-
put some numbers on where I think you were going with that.
I guess the question is, it sort of relates to the fact that we didn't do the traffic study during the school hours. So I don't know if you've done an assessment of whether or not the current situation is an impact to the neighborhood, and whether 400 additional students and 20 additional teachers is going to exacerbate that situation.
So what we tried to do, given the short time frame that we were dealing with and the request of this board, is put together an analysis based on the existing data that's available to Mr. DiMartino through the ITE and other sources, the standards. If a full-blown traffic study, so to speak, is required as part of a land development process by the township, we certainly will have to do that at that time. But for purposes of the discussion here and to provide what we thought was meaningful information, to have a discussion about potential traffic impacts, we simply had Mr. DiMartino look at at standards, and which I believe he's testified to, do in fact, are in fact representative of what's existing at the school district.
Given the time constraints, that's fair. I think what Ed and Bill are asking about is more of an actual observation of what's
Understood.
really occurring, but that's not possible without school, with school not being in session and in the short period of time we had. How much longer do you feel? Sure.
We'll make sure it'll be done.
So,
I think, I mean, personally, yeah, I would like to see a traffic impact study that is based on actual observation during the school year. I realize there's time constraints and we'll have to, but I think the school district should give some thought to that as part of this process.
Ken, do you have any other questions?
I would like, with the parking that hasn't come up yet and stuff, an employee count, not a faculty count? In other words, how many employees are at the building?
As far as parking at the building?
Yeah.
That's something you can get us, Joe?
We know that the total employee count is between 150 and 200. We could give you that, we could give you the actual number at some point.
Do they park on campus or on the?
Yes.
Thank you.
Jessica, do you guys have any questions for Guy?
No.
Any other questions for Guy? No. Thanks, Guy.
Thank you.
I'll call Doug White, W-A-I-T-E. He is our pinch hitter this evening as the civil engineer for the project. He has not been qualified before this board and has not testified before this board, so has not been sworn in yet.
Please raise your right hand, Doug. Do you swear to tell the truth, all truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And your full name and capacity in which you appear before the board this evening, please.
Douglas Waite, W-A-I-T-E. I'm a professional engineer licensed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and work for Gilmore and Associates, the civil design engineer.
Mr. Waite, I've had opportunity in advance to review your CV. How long have you been licensed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
What was it, 14 years now?
And in the last 5 years, has your licensure been suspended, revoked, or otherwise
No, it's-
handled in a similar capacity?
It has not, no.
And have you been refused the opportunity to testify before any similar boards such as this or courts as a professional engineer?
No, I haven't.
I'm familiar with Mr. Waite's CV separately as well, and I do feel that he meets the criteria for admission as a expert in the field of professional engineering in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Unless there's discussion or objection from the board members, we'll accept Douglas as an expert professional.
Thank you. Doug, if we could turn to Exhibit 10 in the packet, could you describe, and again, just for the boards, just in brief review, we had at A7 provided a building and parking lot expansion plan. And if you look at A7, you'll see that the parking lot is elongated towards the ball field, towards the baseball field. The question had come up, I believe, from the board with respect to how far away was that from the ball field, and could there be a different configuration? Doug, could you explain how the configuration in A7 is different from the configuration in A10.
Yes, the previously proposed number of parking spaces, for the most part, have been moved to the north side of the existing parking lot, centered on the open space, and away from the, away from the right field line, from the baseball field. And it is located now, the edge of it is 268 feet away from home plate. There were 3 fewer parking spaces than the previous plan. However, we were able to lose a 0.5% of impervious coverage, so we have a more economical layout.
Doug, did you look at different configurations and traffic circulations?
Yeah, the idea was to make sure that, in making sure that this layout was economical, we took a look at providing angled parking, providing aisles that were vertical as opposed to, in the plan, as opposed to horizontal. We tried adding a few more spaces with basically the obvious conclusion that more impervious was added. So in general, to the area of new parking shown here in the north side of the parking lot, accommodates the loss of existing parking and the addition of the required parking for the building expansion.
And Doug, just to summarize that, the configuration that's proposed at A10 marries up as best it can with the existing parking that's provided right now on site, correct?
That's correct. It replicates as much as we can a circulation that is that makes sense with the existing circulation. It's a good compromise with respect to the addition of impervious versus the addition of parking spaces.
And Doug, you did look at one-way circulation, and that did not result in an increased reduction in impervious coverage, correct?
That's true. In a singular, we do have a combination here of a two-way and a one-way, but having it all one-way did not actually result in a decrease in impervious coverage.
No further questions.
Jessica?
No questions.
Ed?
Yes, I do have some questions. There's been a couple alternatives submitted in the past,
Right.
and I don't have the exhibit number here, but I have the plan here that shows the baseball field, and this would be exhibit number
A6, I believe.
A6,
This one,
7.
the last.
page 202, on 7. It's on, I have it on 11 tab. Is that the correct?
The previously submitted plan is Exhibit A7. A6 was the existing features plan, and A10, I believe it is. A10 is the reconfigured parking that we came up with as a result of the questions and concerns of the board.
Joe, just, we've gotten obviously stuff before, and then we got notebooks today.
Yes.
At the meeting, and we've got the large format.
Yes.
A10 is the large format?
Yes.
Okay, so A10 is going to be what you're asking for approval.
Yes, based on the feedback that we got from the board, we changed that configuration.
Gotcha, good. I just want to go through now that things have changed, and you're asking for various variances, whether or not you could highlight them for us. One of the variances, building coverage. Is the school building as it currently stands in compliance with the ordinance for building coverage?
I'm sorry, the building as it currently stands
Yes.
is the existing condition is slightly under,
And how much more are you going over building coverage?
so we are 2.3% more,
3% more?
two-
Okay.
2.3%.
Which, just for clarity, leaves you at 1.5% over the
Correct.
allowable.
How about the front yard setback? Is anywhere in, on this plan, were you increasing the front yard, decreasing the front yard setback?
Now, the existing front yard setback is a nonconformity, I believe, along Leadham, and it's not being,
It's not being expanded?
it's not being expanded, correct.
Okay. Building height, how far is the building in compliance currently?
It is currently not in compliance, and we're proposing to not increase that, or,
No
not,
increase,
yeah, no.
mimic the existing non.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Impervious coverage, you're going to, I know you said it was a change there, but you highlight that for me as well?
Yeah, the previous plan had shown 49%, and we were down to 48.5%. So we're asking, with this revised plan, it's 0.5% less of an increase over.
So the total impervious is over by what number?
8.5% at this point.
8.5%
Yes.
over the allowed.
And again, and if I can just add just a little tiny bit of clarity, there was a previous variance years ago that put the high school over by 2.9%.
Yes.
So you're looking for a total increase.
5.6%.
Thanks.
Okay, good. Now I got that in. Now, the question comes up in my mind that you're increasing the student population and the teacher population. And I know it's probably going to be, can you address the sewage facilities, whether or not that you have an approval process you'll have to go through?
It'll be part of the land development process.
Be part of the land development
And
process.
condition, the final approval would be conditioned upon receiving any increase, approval for any increased sewage capacity.
Any preliminary information that you have capacity?
We have not done an
Okay.
investigation on that.
Any other facilities in the area that will need to be approved later? Like electric, gas, all those, water supply?
Yeah, with each individual utility, but again, all those, any approvals for, if there's, the fire marshal would have to review the plan. So for fire, water supply and sprinklers, electric, it's not necessarily part of the land development approval, but approval of all the utilities, I should correct that. Approval of all the utilities, is a condition of final approval.
So all those issues,
I'm sorry, the approval of all new utilities is a condition, or will be a condition of final land development approval.
good. And then what we're looking for here, though, is that I know that all those other issues are going to be looked at by other official capacity in the township, and we're not looking at those things here. We're just trying to determine whether the new additions and proposed additions fit into the neighborhood, and it won't have an impact on the neighbors. It won't affect their quality of life. So
Understood.
just trying to clear. Thank you, that's all I have.
And this is a good break.
I actually only had two questions that I think, unless someone else, but these are quick.
Go ahead.
We, in the last time you were here, I think we talked about that you guys had analyzed different parking layouts and you were trying to accomplish your parking goals. Is the new A10, can you just quickly update what's the net change in parking as a result of the reconfigured plan?
From the last plan?
Or just overall compared to existing?
Compared to the existing, we have, excuse me, 46 spaces additional,
Net additional.
net additional, yeah.
Okay. I would just ask a question on A10. You know, we have certain things around the parking lot that are noted as planter area. And we have now a number of proposed islands in the parking lot. Would those be planted? Is that how you're getting your impervious coverage variance down a little bit from what you originally were requesting? Are you going to plant those?
Yeah, they would be planted to the extent that they can, and also meet landscape requirements for the township.
Right, but to be clear, the 0.5% decrease in impervious coverage was not a result of putting those planters in there. It was just a matter of the entire reconfiguration, and we did lose, I believe, 3 spots, correct?
Three spots fewer.
So, but we felt that based on the feedback from this board, that that was important.
This A10 preserves the functionality of the baseball field.
100%.
Okay. So just before we wrap it up, to be clear, Jessica requested the enrollment study. Kenny requested the total employee count at the high school. Right? Anything else?
Yes, there was a study they were going to submit of the historic numbers for the school population.
That'll be in the enrollment. I believe that's a.
Enrollment study.
That's why I asked them to clarify that.
Yes.
No, the actual.
Yeah, I would still like the school district to consider whether, as part of this, are the impacts from traffic understood? Have we gotten adequate information on what those are going to be?
Well, our August 15th agenda is back. Or what was the date of the hearing, Bill? 5th?
September 5. We don't have one. August 15.
August 15th is back. So September 5 is the date after that. That may be a nice guy.
Might be.
I don't know when school goes back in session, or if September 5 is even a good date.
If with all due respect to this board, and I very much appreciate everybody sitting here, but to try and conduct or require the district to conduct a full-blown traffic study in a time period to accommodate this board's schedule, as well as the schedule of trying to move forward with construction for the district, is nearly impossible. So what we did provide is pretty much as far as we can go within the confines of this board, understanding that if the township requires us, the district that is, to conduct a full-blown traffic study as part of what needs to happen for land development, we will need to do that.
Can I ask a question? Does the school district have any previous full-blown traffic study?
For this particular location that would be applicable to the conditions that we're talking about, I do not believe so.
They have no current, or
We've done.
last time they put an addition on there?
I don't think that the traffic, the ITE manual, everything has changed. So I'm not sure that we have those counts or that they would be relevant to what is the existing condition today. I mean, even the demographics change. People walk, people don't walk. The kids around the neighborhoods gentrify. So it just would be an apples to oranges comparison, I believe, at this point. Because the last time the school was expanded was in 97, so we're talking, a few years ago now.
Trying to help?
All right, anything else?
No.
Yes? Billy? No. Okay. Mr. Calhoun?
Mine?
Yeah.
What date are we looking for?
September 5. Cal, hey Cal. Cal,
Oh, sorry.
how do we look for the 5th? We have a lot of cases.
I don't have anything scheduled for the 5th as of yet. I imagine that we will probably have quite a few continued cases from the very full agenda in August, but otherwise, nothing.
We're looking at the 5th. If that's not convenient for you or anyone here, we can go to the next meeting.
We'll be fine on the 5th. The only professional we won't have here is Mr. Orr, but I think the board has heard enough from him at this point.
Okay. With that, this case is continued to our September 5th hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you. You all right, Arthur? Thanks for hanging in there.
Yeah, thank you very much.
How'd you work through May? For the quotes?
Mr. Kane?
We're adjourned.